key topic of conversation, especially in Toronto, is the immigration problem and how many immigrants have been coming here. And so I think eventually people who are going to be watching this show, they're not going to be from Canada. So if you could provide like an explanation of the situation, what people are complaining about if you're not from Canada, et cetera, and how we got here, that I'd love to chop it up on that.
Well, essentially, Canada's economy wasn't being productive. And because governments love easy fixes for productivity instead of the difficult ones, which basically happened back in 2016, 2017 when our GDP dropped quite a bit below the US. Basically, we started mass immigration to Canada. And so what that does is it artificially stimulates the economy by bringing over more workers that are now being more productive. And so Canada's economic output increases. And so the problem with then what happened was, so I think we started bringing over which in context, so I could be wrong on these numbers, but I believe the U.S. immigrates about 500,000 new immigrants. I think that's the number. I could be wrong. 500,000 new immigrants legally, intentionally, on an annual basis. Canada started with our 1/10 of the population immigrating 1 million new immigrants into the country without the housing infrastructure, without the job infrastructure to do it. So here we have a problem, right? Because we don't have the necessary housing infrastructure for new immigrants. These immigrants are highly skilled immigrants as well. But Canada didn't have the infrastructure in place to actually put them to work where their skill set lies. So we're immigrating. So here's it's weird to think about. Canada is the most educated yet least productive country in the G7. So what do? Well, we go and we find individuals from other countries who are highly skilled, often have advanced degrees, and come into Canada. Well, the problem with that is that those jobs just don't exist for them because we already have people in those positions because we're very highly educated ourselves. Look, if you're going to do immigration, you want the highest skilled individuals coming over, right? Like that's kind of policy 101. And so what ended up happening is only 31% of immigrants are working in a job that they're qualified to work in the context of like that they need the degrees they have to work in. So it's not like there's a bunch of unqualified people working in those positions. It's just, there's former doctors working as Uber drivers. There are MBAs with university like degrees from good schools who are working in retail stores. And so all of a sudden we've got this influx of skilled immigrants, but at a very, very high unsustainable level. And we don't have the infrastructure to support them. And so that obviously contributes to our housing problem. But we're also seeing food bank usage go up. We're also seeing poverty or below poverty line incomes, that rate increase. There's some interesting studies done on child poverty rates where allegedly it's gone down. But when you factor in the influx of immigration, that can be debated whether it's gone down or gone up over the past 8 years. So there's some issues with our immigration system. We're unsustainable in our immigration, and that's why even Trudeau last year said we're going to put a temporary pause on immigration. And then you heard Carney say the same thing. Well, we're going to pause our immigration. The thing is that it provides, like when we have social systems that are at risk of collapsing, what's one quick, easy fix? We'll just insert more money into the economy or more economic output into the economy through immigration. So someone comes and gets a job and all of a sudden like they're bringing their capital to Canada. Great. Now they're paying into CPP. Now they're paying into EI. Now they're paying into these different programs before they weren't. So it's an easy Band-Aid fix. And when I kind of said earlier, politicians are like recently have been like the king of Band-Aid fixes where they're basically patching holes in a dam with Band-Aids, and pretty soon the whole thing's going to break when we wanted to start pivoting towards a more positive topic. But that's one of the things that they try to patch fix from my understanding.
I believe it's Charlie Munger who has the quote where show me someone's incentives and I'll show you what they're going to do or show you their behavior. Yeah. And that's case in point here, right? The incentive structure is just completely wrong. The accountability system is just not there. And I live downtown Toronto, so I live in the thick of it. And it is such a polarizing topic. And everybody's opinion, everybody who's watching this, if you're involved, all of your opinions make sense. And almost all of them are right. Like the people who were here, we did get screwed by too many people coming over. But your problem isn't with the people
No.
that came here, because you would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, you would have done the exact same thing. And then when you get here and when you aren't able to work the job that you were told you'd be able to work, or the whole reason why you're coming here in the first place, to build this dream life for yourself, and you come here and you can't do it, of course you're going to look around at the people who are in that position and think they're the reason that you don't have it. It's not. Like, it's not my fault. It's not the people who came here's fault. It's the people who let this happen.
Yeah.
And if you just zoomed out, this is inevitable. Like, there's no way this couldn't have happened. You're letting in way too many people. They don't have the situation that you're telling them they're going to get, and you're letting in too many at one time, right? Like, so Canada's awesome that it's multicultural, but for the system that we've built, it can only be maintained by dripping in immigration. If you throw too much of any kind of immigration into it, it changes the whole system that attracted people to it in the first place. And it becomes inevitable, right? Because when you were an immigrant from another country and you moved here, you probably moved with a tight-knit group, but you were forced to assimilate a little bit. Right? You were forced to become Canadian. Now, there's so many people being thrown into Canada where they can basically live exactly how they did from a social standpoint back home. They don't have to adapt. They don't have to assimilate. And humans, if I've learned anything as a marketer, it's that the key to understanding almost all things in life is that human beings are survival machines. We're not thriving machines. We don't do what's best for us. We do what is easiest. And so if you don't force yourself to do what's hard because you know the outcome is worth it, you just won't. Yeah. And so that's why it was really hard when people would move over here. I have so many friends that are immigrants, and they're some of my favorite people. Like, I think it's amazing that Canada allows that to take place. I consider myself so blessed that I grew up in the most multicultural school environment I could describe. It was out of a TV show, man. Like, for the feeder, my elementary school was the feeder school for the mentally challenged kids in the town, the English as a second language kids in the town. We were a feeder for 2 different government housing complexes, and we were also the feeder for gifted children. So in my school, I got to see Canada at its best, right? Like, everybody there, and we all got along. And so it was great because it was like enough of everything, but not too much where anything could take over. And I was like, that's what needs to happen. But we've built a system where that can't happen. So I just wanted to rant about that because I think about this so much, and I sympathize with people on every part of the equation. Like, I've been in Uber after Uber where I sit down and I talk to people, and I sympathize with their situation. And I know that everyone who's making fun of the immigrants that have moved here and saying, oh, they live weirdly or whatever, and they're making them the scapegoat or the issue. It's like, if you sat down and had a real conversation with these people, you would understand you're the exact same. Like, we've all been screwed, but not by each other. We got to stop fighting with each other and work to build a better system, because it's a lot like the economy in the first place. This is a bad situation. What do you do now? I can tell you right now, the polarization and us hating each other and thinking that my neighbor is the reason for my problem and the immigrant is the reason for my problem, and vice versa. That's not constructive. It doesn't help anyone.
Not at all. Not at all. And you get these, there's going to be racist individuals in every part of every world, right? So you're going to always see that, and that's always going to unfortunately come out on the top. And the issue is that when reasonable people are now faced with this decision of like, well, so-and-so or my friends are going to think I'm racist if I'm against immigration, but really I'm not against immigration. I just want to make sure that my country is sustainable and our economic growth is sustainable. And if that means that I have to come out in support of lower immigration, then I'll do that, but maybe I'll do that privately. But now what we're seeing is large-scale protests of immigration in cities like Hamilton, in cities around the GTA, which maybe there is some bad actors in those communities, but that doesn't happen without a government that enables this type of issue to rise in the first place. And what I feel like is the Liberals are kind of the king of wedge issues, where they will do something en masse and then they will, start stereotyping people who disagree with them.
Yes.
And it's identity politics at its core, right? And so we're going to do something that on a small scale sounds good. We are multicultural and we are diverse. So we are going to bring in an unsustainable amount of new immigrants. And if you do not agree with us, then you are not multicultural and diverse. In fact, you are racist. And all of a sudden it's like, well, where did sound economic thinking go? And where did rational thinking go? Where did rational debate go? Why can't I have a conversation about this? and without kind of being labeled in a certain way. And so it's an easy way to avoid scrutiny when you know that if you speak out against something, that you are going to get labeled and potentially canceled, or have the rage mob on Twitter after you.
But that's been so effective. It's gone through to beyond the politicians. Yeah. It's in the minds of their supporters too. Because I'm in the unique situation where I lean to the current definition of right, and my friend group that I grew up with are incredibly liberal. And so it's now gotten to a place where I can't even have a conversation and attempt to make a sound point, because they'll instantly label you as exactly the things that you're saying, the things that the Liberal Party has used as weapons to stifle conversation that can genuinely be constructive, right? And so I've now just given up, which is, I'm realizing this in real time, how bad that is and how that's probably happening in every friend group, right? Where, and it's so detrimental, and it feels like we fell for a psyop that's been really well executed, and it's now happening. And that's why I started this show in the first place, was because conversations like this need to happen. And in fact, I think honestly we should do this show again with someone who's like really on the left and try to hear their sides of this all, because it's so important to not become too biased, because if you do that, you're lost. And that's why every few months, and I recommend everyone doing this, go try to find the creators creating content that conflict with your opinions. Watch it and look for how much clear misinformation and lies there are there, and then realize, if you're a relatively smart person, that's happening on your content too. Right? Like if you're watching the right wing stuff, and if you sit down and you watch the left wing stuff and you're like, they're literally lying in half of this, you have to realize there's at least a degree of that happening on your right wing stuff too. Right. So we should stop listening to these outlets that are being controlled by the politicians and talk to the people. And this solution gets solved by you having that hard conversation, and by us all collectively being more kind to each other and lowering the risk of what having a hard conversation looks like. Right. The stakes are too high. Like if I share my opinion, that's not hurting anybody on social media, and it's not cool, or it's not progressive enough, that shouldn't ruin my life. Like, come on, guys. Like, that's how we screwed this whole thing up, is because this is exactly what's happened. The best people and the most sound minds are no longer even part of the equation, because they know the risk is too high, because nuance gets lost on people, and they know that the risk is, like, it's more likely than not that eventually they're going to get canceled. So if you think about it logically, the smartest minds would just look at that and be like, it's not worth touching. And that's a really bad place. So collectively, the accountability is on us. Luckily, I think cancel culture is going away, and I think that can hopefully improve things. But we all collectively, like, if you're still here, you hold so much power in what you do every single day, what you consume, and the conversations that you have. Don't lose sight of that. If you lose sight of that, the big guys win. Everyone else wins.